Welcome to part 2 of the Nintex RPA Masterclass. Part 1, we should have already downloaded our trial of Nintex RPA, created our mock data, and opened up our RPA Masterclass template. So we're good to go. And if you're following along with the instructions, we're at page number 1. So for the scenario that we're going to build, it's a very common request that we get. Legacy data, so something like an Excel spreadsheet access database behind the firewall on-premises legacy application, but it's a repetitive set of copy-paste actions to get that information into another system. So it could be moving something from a CSV output up to your marketing system. It could be a risk system, HR, payroll, so on and so forth. The opportunities and options are fairly extensive, as well as the content stores underneath. So we're seeing them bubble up from all sorts of different places, where things like Excel is being used as a register, Access being used as a database, or even just a off the shelf that's been procured by another business unit, but that information is quite siloed and it's useful to other parts of the organization. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the onboarding scenario from the previous Process Excellence in a Day series, and we're going to extend it to robotic process automation. Let's assume that your company has acquired another organization and we need to repetitively push new user accounts up into the cloud. But there's a lot of different options. Could be a contract team that's joining the business, and we've got all that information in a structured CSV as an output. Now it's going to be quite laborious for me to punch that information into my HR system one by one if I'm an HR coordinator or such like. So let's get the RPA bot to do it, and that means we can keep utilizing this functionality in lots of different scenarios and use cases. So the first thing that we've done is we've created these variables for you. So we've actually done some of the setup in this RPA template. You'll see that all the variables match to the names of the columns that we have that we want to put into our HR system. What we've also done is we've created a link to Nintex Workflow Cloud, because what we're actually going to do is execute a workflow at the end of all of the processing. So we're going to go through Excel, store the information in that bot's brain, and then fire off a workflow. And we're going to do that quite repetitively. But we're going to get that Excel spreadsheet from an email address. So we've set up some credentials, and we've also set up the initial email as well. And finally, what we need to do is log all the information back to the desktop. So we want to keep a running log of everything that's happened as the bot has actually performed the task. This again is another common request. So if you're following along, we're on page 2 of the manual. And what we actually want to do is create just one variable into the template just to show you that experience. So we've got all the variables that we need except a spreadsheet location. So we're just going to click on the plus sign at the top of variables. So select variables from the right hand side and plus. Now the name of my variable is var underscore spreadsheet underscore location. It's a text variable, and we can leave the value blank, the input and output variables unticked. Now where this comes into play is if we're calling this bot from Nintex Workflow Cloud. So there is a start RPA job task or action within Nintex Workflow Cloud that's going to allow me to run an autonomous RPA bot from a cloud-based workflow environment. So establishing that RPA plus digital process automation link, and then we can obviously push that back up to Nintex Workflow Cloud. So let's just OK that, and that's created that new variable for me. So we've got our credentials already been created as well, and my email account has already been created as well. But what we can do here is just sanity check that that actually is created correctly. So let's go to credentials and let's click on the pencil. And let's just fulfill the password to make sure that's up to date. It's capital N, the number 1, lowercase n, T, the number 3, lowercase x, and 2 exclamation marks. And let's just OK that. And then let's go to email. Click on these 3 lines here. Click on the pencil. and we need to confirm the password. Again, capital N, 1, lowercase n, t, 3, x, exclamation, exclamation. We can click on test settings to make sure that there is a communication between the RPA bot and the email address that we're going to pick up the Excel spreadsheet from. So let's just click on test settings. Excellent. That looks like it's passed both a send and a receive. So we can close that down and click on OK. Now if we click on workflow and click on edit, this access token that's already been pasted in for you is specific to the Nintex Workflow Cloud environment that we're actually going to use right at the very end to run the workflow, essentially pushing the data from an email.excel spreadsheet into the bot and up to a digital workflow in the cloud. Now, if you're looking for this, it's in the settings page of your Nintex Workflow Cloud installment, user access tokens. You'll need to create a new one and then copy that into the bot. So we're ready to start building the bot. The first thing that we want to do is set the speed of the bot. So if we have a look down here into library, there are 388 actions that the RPA bot can perform across different pieces of data, different systems, so on and so forth. So quite considerable and very granular in what it can perform. And these actions are grouped by specific types within the left-hand navigation bar. So as we scroll down through, these are all the options that you can perform on your data, your spreadsheet, your Access database, your different systems of record, so on and so forth. So the first one that we want is actions flow set speed, which is down at the bottom. And what we're going to do is just select the number 11. Let's click on OK. We'll leave run as set to green. And when we click on OK, you should see this bar at the bottom, the speed bar, jump up to all but the end. And we've just configured our first RPA action. So if you're brand new to RPA, congratulations, you're now building a bot effectively. And we're ready to continue on with the work. So next up, we want to reset variables. So sometimes these bots can be shared, and if we share it and it inherits a previous person's variable, we're going to want to reset those variables to make it clean for the data that we're going to use. So let's go to Actions and Data and scroll down to the bottom, and we've got our variables options. So let's select Clear Variable. And we're going to clear all the selected variables, clear all except selected variables. And the one that we want to click on here is the spreadsheet location, the row count, and the current row. So what we're going to be doing is effectively clearing the database variables, but we want to not clear the variables which correspond to the size of the data sheet and the location of the data sheet, spreadsheet, row count, current row. So all except selected variables, click var current row, row count, spreadsheet location, and click on OK. Now if we had data in our variables, that would be reset now and we'd be at this stage ready to go. So this helps me share this bot. Let's say I go into bot flow and export and share that with somebody else in my organization. If they're running this clear variable, that's going to give them a nice clean slate to work from. So next up, we want to retrieve and store the email attachment. So the first thing that we need to do is set the location that we're actually going to store this spreadsheet in. So again, let's go to Data and Set a Variable. We'll use the ellipses here, the 3 dots, to select the variable that we want to choose, and it's that spreadsheet location, and click on OK. Make sure you only click each once. Double clicking will add 2 entries into the field. And using the magic wand, we're going to make this a generic location. In this instance, it's going to be our desktop directory, but we're also going to create a new folder. So let's go our magic wand in value. I'm going to click Folders, click Desktop Directory. Next up, let's go to Date and Time and scroll all the way to the bottom, which is a standardized white labeled variable for year week, which is week 22 of the year at the moment, and the date and time year 2020. Let's just go between the two year, week, and year, between those two square brackets, and do an underscore. So we should have desktop directory year, week, underscore, year in that format as it stands. OK that. OK again, leaving the run on green. And you should have a desktop directory that's been created now for your spreadsheet location, which is nice and handy. So we're now on page 5 of the manual, and what we're going to do is create a folder. Now let's make the assumption that this is a running weekly task, and we want to create an individual folder for each week of the year, as and when this bot runs. So it's going to be dependent on the year week, and that's going to create a folder locally for me. So I want to go to Files, scroll down to my Folders bucket, and Create Folder. Now my folder is going to be a variable, so let's select the magic wand, down to Variables, and click on my spreadsheet location. So that's going to create an individual folder depending on the week and the year that we are in, but it's always going to create it on the desktop of whichever machine this bot is running. OK, we can click Overwrite and run. So I should now have a folder that has been created on my desktop for the 22nd week of 2020. And let's just have a look. So that has just been created for me. I'll just leave that there because I actually want to see when the spreadsheet comes into that specific folder. So speaking of that spreadsheet, I'm going to have to send that spreadsheet to the email address that I'm actually using here, siad@ntxteo2.com. Now, if you are using a different email address, you'll have to send the spreadsheet template to that email address. So what I'm going to do is a new email. I'm going to send it to siad@ntxteo2.com. Now I have a set subject line that I'd like the bot to look for, and that subject is project team. This is a set of consultants that are joining my project, and I'm going to attach the document. So I'm going to attach the spreadsheet that has been downloaded. So I'm just going to search for that spreadsheet, the mock data 1 spreadsheet, and I can drag that in. I've renamed it to RPA data. So you can do that just to make life a little bit easier. And that's ready to go. So let me send. And I'm ready to configure the retrieve email action. So I'll go to my actions and email. And I'm going to get email. This is an interesting action here as it's highly configurable as to the rules that you want to apply to the emails that you're searching through that inbox. It could be another folder that's in the list on that solution in a day option. You can also choose to retrieve all messages, unread messages, read, or custom. And we're going to select custom. We're not going to limit it because there might be more than one person that's emailed me a list of project teams with attachments. So the status is unread. I'd like to only pick up the new emails that have come in, maybe on a daily schedule or a weekly schedule. You can set a date. You can set the from address, to address, and CC. My subject is going to contain project team. The attachments must be there, so I want to skip any that haven't sent the attachment, and that's all that I need for that specific action. And there are a lot of options in there you can configure, and this has been highly useful for any unmonitored email addresses, such as incoming invoices and so on. So you can click OK. And that's going to go and retrieve email. So you'll notice in the bottom left, it's currently retrieving that email for me. And we've got two options that have been selected. So one from today and one from March the 26th, which is a previous demo that we've done. I'm going to delete that one, and I'll mark it as unread in the mailbox, because I only want to work with the latest one that we've got. So what we're going to do next is actually store that email. So we're going to store the content of the email, we're going to grab the attachment, and we're going to save that attachment. So for each email that you capture, you're going to loop through the email. So we'll go email, and we'll go loop email. No configuration required on this one, so we'll just OK, and that's going to loop for however many emails have actually been captured. And then we want to save the attachment. So actions, email, save attachment. The destination that we want is not a hard-coded folder, so we're not going to search, we're going to use the magic wand, variables, spreadsheet location. OK that. We can overwrite if we want to, so if we've already got an attachment in there, we can override it if it's the same name. We can filter, and we can delete all attachments after we've saved the file. So we'll go into inbox and we'll delete those. So we'll leave those as blank, and OK. So we now have a spreadsheet that has been downloaded into that folder. So if I open the folder up, I've got my RPA data spreadsheet that has been added to the folder. So on page 6 of the manual, we're now ready to start opening those applications and resize to make the page a little bit more friendly. First thing we want to do is open that Excel workbook. So let's go to Actions, Excel, Open Workbook. The workbook that we want to open, we're going to use the magic wand and select the variable for my spreadsheet location. We're then going to do backslash and the name of the spreadsheet that you've downloaded. In my instance, it is RPA data.xlsx. And this must correspond directly to the name of the attachment that you've downloaded, otherwise it will get an error. But the workflow needs to know what to open. Now you could replicate the keyboard on the mouse. If you want to double click to open folders and double click to open workbooks, you can replicate that function as well, using the targeter and a send click action. Let's click on OK, and that should open Excel for me. Now with the attachment open, one thing we'll need to do is move the open workbook action outside of the loop. Let's just pull that green arrow down, and with the workbook open, we're ready to start manipulating the rest of the data. One thing we might want to do is tidy things up a bit before we do that. So what we can do is we'll resize the windows. So using the targeter for the first time, click and hold. And you'll notice RPA disappears in a background task, and you can hover over specific actions. And I'm going to release once the black box is fully surrounding Excel. So not within a particular window, not within a particular cell, but the entire RPA Excel box. Now what you can do is just hover over the file name, that should work, and release. That will pick Excel as the target, and we can scroll down to resize window. Now I'd quite like this to be in the top left corner of the screen, so we'll click on OK. And that's moved that into the top left corner. Now let's jump to the other window. I've got two screens open today, so we'll just drag that back across so we can see what we're doing here. In an ideal world, I'd be on the one screen. So we can resize Nintex RPA at this point as well. Using the Me option, we can resize Nintex RPA. For this, we might go the right 50% of the screen and run. That has also jumped to the other screen, so I'm just going to drag this back across. But when this runs at the end, what I'll do is I'll record my other screen so you can see it all working. And finally, we're going to open the form that we're actually going to populate with the Excel information. So all of this information has to go into another system of record. So what I'm going to select up here is Computer. And we're going to open an app. Now it could be Chrome, it could be IE. In this instance, we'll use Internet Explorer. And we'll say Open IE. The path is the path to your Internet Explorer .exe. So wherever that is stored, we're going to navigate to it. Now I'm going to use the folder here. Could well be the program files white labeled if you want to use the wand. So we'll start at C drive, program files 86, Internet Explorer, IE Explorer .exe. So this is the application that we want to open up. And under options, we're going to open up the form that we're going to populate this information into. Now it's an Intex Workflow Cloud form. So let's select the URL that's in the manual on page 7 and paste. If Internet Explorer is already running, we probably want to launch it again. So we've got a new window that we can actually put information into. And let's run OK. So IE has opened up. And my Intex Workflow Cloud form has also opened up. Let's just resize. What we can do is also resize that window to be the left quarter of the screen. So what I'm going to do again is just use the targeter, and this will all run on the other window. And what I'll do is I'll record that screen at the very end. Again, let's use the targeter to hover over the entire box. Release. And let's resize the window. We'll make this the bottom left quarter of the screen. And run. It will jump. So what we'll have are 3 open windows on full page real estate. Top left quarter Excel, right hand 50% Nintex RPA, and bottom left quarter the form. Okay. So now as we move through page 7, we want to start getting that information from Excel. So we want to use the targeter to actually pick up specific bits of information and drop that on. But how do we know how large this particular data sheet is? How do we know how many rows we have, how many columns we have, and how many people we actually need to onboard? We're going to use a loop, and that's going to be really handy in figuring out how many times to run the loop. Otherwise, we'd be sort of stuck in a never-ending loop. So what I'm going to do is, using the targeter, click and hold over Excel until targets pop up. So let's click hold. We're in the middle. Now there's that targets box, so we want to keep holding onto the mouse till we get to targets. In the drop down, we're going to select workbook and release. So I want to get info from the workbook. So we've got some actions that correspond directly to Excel. So Nintex RPA has recognized that that application is Excel. And what we want to do is get the information from Excel, from that entire workbook. So we'll click on Get Info here under Target. And now you've got some things that it knows about Excel. And the one that we want is the last row number. And we're going to save that last row number. Make sure you click that to the variable that we've created. So let's click on the 3 dots. Variables. And it's variable row count. OK. With run on green, let's click OK, and we should see the var row count variable update here from 0 to however large my Excel spreadsheet workbook is. So let's click OK, and we've moved to 11. So if yours didn't update, you may have selected either the wrong variable, or you've double clicked, or potentially storing to the wrong variable name. So feel free to rewind the video and replicate those steps. So now to page 8 of the instructions, we're going to loop through all of those different options. But if you notice in my Excel workbook, row number 1 is a set of headers. So it's my column names. So what we're actually going to do is set the variable for current row to start at 2, because we're going to work our way through each and every row. So what I want to do is actions data, scroll down to set variable, and we're going to set the variable using the 3 dots for my current row, OK, to the value, the number 2. Again, 3 dots for our current row, set the value to 2. Now with run on green, current row should update from 0 to 2. Excellent. So now to page 9 of the manual, what we want to do is loop through every row in my spreadsheet. Now the problem is we need to do a little bit of maths, because the row count is 11, but that's not representative of how many rows I have in total. I want to loop not for 11 times, but for 10. So what we're going to do is a little bit of maths. We're going to set a value within the loop. We're going to actually create the loop. So under actions, loop, select loops, loop, and we'll loop for the exact number of times. And that exact number of times is a mathematical formula. So let's click on the magic wand. Let's click on formula, click on math, and subtract. So you'll need to scroll down to almost the bottom, subtract. Now we want to subtract 1 from the overall row count. So we're going to click on number 1, which will open up a box. Click on the magic wand, variables, row count, bar row count. So where it says 11, and OK. And the number 2 is 1, if that makes sense. So we're subtracting 1 from the overall row count. Click on add. Now it should do that maths for you. If it doesn't say the size of your row minus 1, something's gone wrong. So just rewind the video and watch back. Click on add. Let's put that maths in there. Now you might need to delete this 0, which is a default value. So just watch when you put your formula in there that it hasn't added that default value. Let's click on OK. Let's click on run. And what we should see is the size of the loop when the loop action gets run, set to 10. So we're at 1 of 10. Okay. Now what we want to do is go through each and every column of each and every row, extract the data, save it as a value in the bot's brain. So if we think about variables as the bot just committing this to memory for it to then use later on. So we're going to start with first name or full name. And Dale Pixton up there is my first name. So what I'd expect once I do this is to see Dale Pixton in my var full name. If I get there, I know that it's worked. So what we're going to do is take the targeter, click and hold, and we're going to go to cell A2 and release. That's an exact cell. So click and hold the targeter, hover over A2 and release. So what we want to do here is just click on this exact cell. And where it says row, we're going to just remove the number and we're going to add a variable. So that variable, again, magic wand, variables, is the current row because we've got more than just the one row. This would be fine if all we were doing was one line of data. But in this instance, we could have hundreds of rows of data. So we want to make sure that we're white labeling and selecting correctly. So OK. And that should update your exact cell. So just the little down arrows to get there. And what we want to do is get the value of that row. So of that cell, that individual cell, we want to get the value. And that's an option that is here under data in the middle, get value. That opens up the get value box. So now on page 10 of the manual, we want to get the value and want to save it to the variable full name. So 3 dots, variables, var full name, click that once, OK. Now if you want to, you can amend the text. You can change the text, make it all upper, lower, or the proper case. You can remove the spaces, leading and trailing. Sometimes CSVs contain sort of before spaces, after spaces, depending on how it comes in. So we'll remove that. We don't want that going into our form. And select OK. So we want to do the same for the other columns. So columns B, C, D, E, F, and G. We're going to do the exact same process. Now it's really easy to do this with Nintex RPA. I don't have to use the targeter again to do this. What I can do is just right click on get value, copy, right click again, and paste. Now it's going to create the exact same action. So all I need to do is use my pencil to edit. And instead of column A, I'm going to here choose column B. And I'm going to update this from a save to full name using the ellipses, variables, and I'm going to save it to the value I need for column B, which is job title. So variable job title, and OK. Run again. And we've updated job title. So we've got Dale Pixton, who's an analog circuit design manager. So let's just replicate that quickly for the rest of the rows, and I'll see you back here for the population. All right, welcome back. So we've got all of our variables populated. We've got full name, job title, company, email, phone number, state, and country. So it's really easy just by copy pasting to get all of that information in, and you've done that now for one single loop. So now that information is committed to essentially the robot's brain or memory, we're ready to populate the form. So this is our form here. This is our onboarding form. Could be our HRIS, could be our CRM system, but essentially something that doesn't allow me to do a web service integration, doesn't allow me to import a CSV. So we're ready just to populate that information into the actual form. But once we've done that, we'll show you how you can actually run a workflow to negate the need to do this part of it as well. So again, we're going to use the targeter, and we're going to click and hold and drop it on the controls on the form. And the first one that we've got is full name. So again, click and hold the targeter, navigate to your form, make sure that the cursor is in the full name control, and release. So what do we want to do inside that control? Well, you've got a lot of information that you can send across, and what we're going to do is send a value. Now you might notice here we've got send credential as well. If your application requires a login or a password username combination, we can actually send that from the credentials section as well. So we'll send a value. We're going to select the magic wand to pick the variable that we want to send, variables, and full name. So Dale's name should be sent across to the all aboard form. A few configuration options. If you want to make sure that you're in the right text box, you can click the mouse before sending. If you're working your way through a form, you can tab to the next section. Again, we've got the change case, the remove spaces, speed, and overwrite mode. So we'll click on OK, and we should see Dale's name populated in the other side. Excellent. So we're now just going to replicate that for the rest of the form, and then we'll come back when we're ready to submit. Excellent, welcome back. So now we've completed all of Dale's information, we're actually now ready to submit this form. Now instead of sending a value, we're just going to do the same as we did there by clicking on the control, but this time we're going to replicate the mouse clicks. Instead of replicating some keyboard strokes, we're going to replicate the mouse clicks. So let's just click and hold, hover over submit, make sure it's highlighted and release. And what we want to do is send a click. Now you can select right click, double click, mouse button sequence that's been pre-recorded, but we're going to select a click. We can bypass the mouse for a quicker click. And we'll click on OK, and that should submit this form. Perfect. But as you'll notice, we've got way more than one row. So we actually want to do this again for the next person. So what we're going to do is reload that form. So we're going to use the targeter, hover over the whole application, and instead of sending keyboard strokes or mouse clicks, we're going to send a refresh command, so an F5 essentially. So let's send a value, and then using the magic wand, we're going to go down to keyboard and select F5. So you can actually send shift commands, control commands. If you've got a shift F5 for a hard refresh, you could do shift plus F5. We'll delete that. You could do caps lock, control, back tab, delete, so on and so forth. Even extend the keyboard if you've got some other characters that you need to pass through. But in this instance, we just want to send an F5 as a refresh. And OK. We don't need to select any of the config here, as all we're doing is a keyboard stroke. So let's just click on OK. And that's going to refresh the form for my next stage in the loop. So once we hit the loop, it's going to move to the next person in the row. Now one thing I have just noticed is my end loop is actually outside my send value. So what I want to do is select end loop, and I'm just going to move that down right to the very end of my F5. So we're actually ready to run the next person. Now what we want to do here is increase the variable by 1, so we move to the next row. So we'll just move my arrow up 1 here. What we want to do is data, increase variable, and we're going to increase the variable current row by 1. And that's going to move to row 3, which will be Yankee Bonifant, the nurse practitioner from Mexico, who we're going to onboard next. So click on OK. So move that up 1. Make sure that's inside the loop. And we're now ready to run this particular form for the next set of rows. So congratulations, you've completed your first RPA bot, extracting data from an Excel spreadsheet into a web-based form in this instance. But what about if we want to negate the form altogether? What if we've built an Intex Workflow Cloud workflow that we can pass this information from using the workflow component that we've created as part of the variable stack? So what we first of all will do is remove any of the actions that are filling in the form specifically. So you can close down Internet Explorer. And what we'll do is remove all of the send values, the click submit, and the F5. So using the shift and the mouse, let's just select all of those actions, right click and disable. We'll move my green arrow up to increase variable. And what we might do is select flow, run workflow, very last action. And because we've already got my Nintex Workflow Cloud set up here, my personal access token, we're going to be able to get a list of all of the component workflows that have been built in that Nintex Workflow Cloud environment. So let's use the drop-down. And there'll be one in here called Run from Bot. So it takes a second just to search all of those workflows that I've got. And we'll go Run from Bot. Now when I've created the workflow, I've selected a set of start event variables. So instead of having a form as the initiator of this particular workflow, it actually is initiated via a component workflow or a web service. So when you're building the workflow, you just need to select component workflow and then build some start event variables. And all we need to do now is match them up. So we'll just match up my country variable with country in the bot. Okay. And repeat for the rest of the variables. All right. So now that we've matched those variables up, we're ready to OK, and what it will do is just execute the workflow. We're not going to see anything on this screen, but it's going to execute a workflow. Now what I can do is go to that Nintex workflow environment and show you the run instances. Now what we should have are two. So both workflows are running. We've got our RPA bot onboarding, which was the form filled in for my first line. So Dale Pixton, and this was the one that used the form as the initiation, a workflow called RPA bot onboarding. But if I go back to instances, I should also have one that's been run by the simple run workflow command within RPA. So run from bot was the name of that workflow. If I look at the instance start data, it's ran it for Dale as well. So that workflow is in progress, which means I can then tie a digital process automation workflow off the back of that Excel-based submission. So if I go to my run from bot demo, this has been built as a component workflow as opposed to a start event form. And I have a set of variables that I'm going to accept from the bot. And these correspond to the variables that match the Excel spreadsheet column names. And now I'm able to use the power of Nintex Workflow off the back of simply starting with an email attached spreadsheet. I can assign a task, I can generate a document, I can make electronic signatory, post message to Microsoft Teams, so on and so forth. So congratulations, you've built your first bot. Just as a recap, set some variables, created a folder on a desktop, went through an email for a particular attachment and stored that locally, opened that application, opened Internet Explorer, got the information from the Excel rows one by one, and populated an Internet Explorer or Chrome-based web-based form. And we also ran a Nintex workflow. So in the last video in the series, I'll show you what this looks like end to end as we run it as an end user view. Now, not to forget, using RPA Central, there's the possibility of scheduling this job on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis, so we don't have to worry about pressing play. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.